Have you ever met someone who just feels different? Not in a way you can easily explain, but there's something about their presence that draws you in. A certain calmness, a depth, an authenticity that's rare in today's world. You might have walked away from a conversation with them feeling lighter, more inspired, or strangely understood without saying much at all. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, spent his entire life studying the human psyche, and while he never used the exact term high vibration, that's more modern spiritual language, his profound insights into consciousness, the collective unconscious, and individuation reveal something remarkable. There are people who operate on a different frequency of existence. And today we're going to explore the 4 unusual signs that reveal someone is vibrating at a higher level of consciousness, signs that are often misunderstood, overlooked, or even criticized by others. But here's what makes this fascinating. These aren't the signs you might expect. We're not talking about people who are always happy, never struggle or float through life without challenges. In fact, quite the opposite. The signs we're about to discuss might surprise you. They might even describe you without you realizing it. So if you've ever felt like you don't quite fit into the world around you, or if you've noticed these patterns in someone close to you, stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand why certain people seem to navigate life with a wisdom that transcends their years, and more importantly, how you can recognize and cultivate these qualities in yourself. Before we dive in, if you're interested in psychology, personal growth, and understanding the deeper aspects of human consciousness, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This channel is dedicated to exploring the profound insights that can transform how you see yourself in the world. Now let's begin with the first unusual sign. Sign 1. They're comfortable with solitude. The misconception about loneliness. In our hyper-connected world, being alone is often seen as a problem to be solved. Social media has convinced us that if we're not constantly surrounded by people, attending events or documenting our social lives, something must be wrong with us. But here's the first unusual sign of someone with high vibration. They're not just comfortable with solitude. They actively seek it. And I want to be very clear here. This isn't about being antisocial, having social anxiety, or avoiding people out of fear. That's an important distinction. Jung's perspective on solitude. Carl Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, requires what he called withdrawal from the collective. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you become who you truly are if you're constantly absorbing the opinions, expectations, and energies of everyone around you? People with high vibration understand something that most people don't. Solitude isn't loneliness. Solitude is where you meet yourself. What this actually looks like. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. Scenario 1, it's Friday night. Everyone's going out. Your phone is buzzing with invitations. But instead of feeling FOMO, fear of missing out, you feel genuinely excited about your evening alone with a good book, your thoughts, or a creative project. You're not avoiding people because you're afraid. You're choosing solitude because you value the quality of your inner world. Scenario 2. You're at a party or social gathering. While others are anxiously networking or desperately trying to fill every moment with conversation, you're comfortable standing alone, observing, present with yourself even in a crowd. You don't need constant stimulation or validation from others to feel okay. The shadow work connection. Now here's where Jung's psychology becomes really profound. He introduced the concept of the shadow and all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. Most people are terrified of being alone because solitude forces them to face their shadow, all the thoughts they've been running from, the emotions they've been numbing, the truths they've been avoiding. They all surface in silence. But people with high vibration, they've done the work of integrating their shadow. They've sat with their darkness and brought it into the light of consciousness. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is why they can be alone without falling apart. They've met all the parts of themselves, the good, the bad, the wounded, the powerful, and they've made peace with it all. Why society misunderstands this? Here's what's fascinating. Our society often judges people who prefer solitude. We call them loners, weird, or antisocial, assume something's wrong with them. But Jung would argue the opposite, that these people have simply evolved beyond the need for constant external validation. They've found what most people spend their entire lives searching for in others: themselves. The energy perspective. From an energetic standpoint, and this is where Jung's psychology intersects beautifully with spiritual traditions. Every interaction is an exchange of energy. People with high vibration are naturally sensitive to energy. They can feel when an environment is draining, when conversations are superficial, or when social dynamics are toxic, so they're selective. They protect their energy not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom. They understand that their inner peace, their creative energy, and their mental clarity are precious resources that need to be guarded. The creative connection. Many of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators were people who spent significant time alone. Jung himself spent years in self-imposed isolation after his break with Freud, which he later called his most creative and transformative period. Einstein spoke about the importance of solitude for deep thinking. Maya Angelou rented a hotel room to write alone, away from all distractions. Solitude isn't where creativity dies, it's where it's born. A personal reflection question. So here's a question for you to reflect on. When was the last time you spent quality time alone, not scrolling through your phone, not distracting yourself, but actually being present with yourself? And more importantly, how did it feel? Were you uncomfortable, anxious, or did you feel a sense of peace and coming home to yourself? Your answer reveals a lot about your current level of consciousness. The balance. Now, I want to emphasize something important. High vibration people aren't hermits. They're not completely disconnected from humanity. In fact, when they do engage socially, they're often deeply present, genuinely connected, and create meaningful interactions. The difference is they're coming from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. They're not seeking something from others. They're sharing their already complete energy. And this brings us perfectly to our second unusual sign, which seems to contradict everything we're taught about success. Sign 2. They've stopped chasing and started allowing. The hustle culture problem. We live in a world obsessed with hustling, grinding, and forcing outcomes. Make it happen. Go get what you want. Winners never quit. The modern self-help industry has convinced us that if we're not constantly pushing, striving, and exhausting ourselves in pursuit of goals, we're lazy or unmotivated. But here's the second unusual sign. People with high vibration have transcended the exhausting paradigm of forcing and entered what Jung would call synchronistic flow. Jung's concept of synchronicity. Carl Jung introduced one of the most fascinating concepts in psychology: synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences that can't be explained by cause and effect. He observed that when people aligned with their true self, what he called the self with a capital S, The totality of the psyche. Life began organizing itself in seemingly magical ways. Doors opened effortlessly. The right people appeared at the right time. Opportunities emerged without force. Jung didn't believe this was random. He believed it was the universe responding to a person's authentic alignment, what allowing actually means. Let me be clear about what this sign does not mean. It doesn't mean sitting on your couch doing nothing and expecting the universe to deliver pizza to your door. It doesn't mean avoiding action, effort, or responsibility. So what does it mean? Allowing means 1. Taking inspired action rather than desperate action. You act when it feels right, when you feel pulled forward, not when you're driven by fear, anxiety, or the need to prove yourself. 2. Trusting the timing of your life. Instead of forcing things to happen on your timeline, you understand that there's a deeper intelligence at work. 3. Letting go of attachment to specific outcomes. You hold your goals lightly rather than gripping them with white knuckles. 4. Recognizing that resistance is information. When something isn't working despite all your effort, instead of pushing harder, you pause and ask, what is life trying to show me right now? The psychological shift. From a Jungian perspective, this shift represents a fundamental change in the ego's relationship with the self. The ego is the conscious mind, your sense of I, your identity, your individual will. The self is the totality of your being, conscious and unconscious, your higher wisdom, your connection to something greater than yourself. Most people live entirely from the ego. The ego decides what it wants, creates a plan, and tries to force reality to comply. But people with high vibration have learned to let the self lead. The ego becomes a servant rather than a master. This doesn't mean the ego disappears. That would be psychosis. It means the ego learns to work in partnership with the deeper intelligence of the self. Real-life examples. Let me give you some real examples of what this looks like. Example 1. Career transitions. Someone with high vibration might leave a prestigious job that looks perfect on paper because it doesn't feel aligned, even if they don't have the next step figured out yet. To outside observers, this looks crazy, impulsive, or irresponsible. But then within weeks or months, a new opportunity emerges that's so perfectly suited to them, it's almost eerie. An opportunity that would never have appeared if they'd been clinging to the old job. That's not luck. That's synchronicity responding to authentic alignment. Example 2. Relationships. They stop desperately searching for a romantic partner, doing all the things the dating advice says to do, going to events they hate just to meet someone. Instead, they focus on becoming the person they want to be, doing things they genuinely love, living authentically. And then, when they're not looking, not forcing, not desperate, the right person walks into their life in the most natural, unexpected way. Example 3. Creative projects. They have a creative idea, a book, a business, a piece of art. But instead of forcing themselves to work on it every day out of discipline, they pay attention to when the energy flows. Some days they feel inspired and create for hours effortlessly. Other days nothing comes. And instead of beating themselves up, they trust that the fallow periods are necessary. They're gathering energy, integrating experiences, allowing the unconscious to do its work, and their creations end up being more authentic and powerful than anything they could have forced. The Eastern philosophy connection. This concept, while articulated through Jungian psychology, has deep roots in Eastern philosophy, particularly Taoism and the concept of wu-wei. Wu-wei translates roughly to effortless action or action through non-action. It's the art of flowing with life rather than against it, the bamboo that bends in the wind rather than the oak tree that breaks. Jung was deeply influenced by Eastern philosophy, especially later in his life. He recognized that Western psychology's emphasis on ego and will had created an imbalance. True psychological health, he believed, required integrating both the Western emphasis on individual consciousness and the Eastern understanding of surrender and flow. Why this is so difficult. Here's why this sign is so unusual and why most people never reach this level. 1. It requires immense trust. Trust in yourself, trust in life, trust in the process. And most people have been conditioned by trauma, disappointment, and fear not to trust. 2. It looks like weakness to others. In a culture that glorifies hustle and control, choosing to allow looks like giving up. People will judge you, question you, and project their own fears onto your choices. 3. It requires you to face your control addiction. Most people are addicted to the illusion of control. Letting go of that feels like death to the ego. 4. It demands radical self-honesty. You have to be able to distinguish between genuine inspired action and lazy avoidance, between healthy trust and passive resignation. The shadow side. Jung would also warn us about the shadow side of this sign. Some people use allowing and trusting the universe as spiritual bypass, a way to avoid taking responsibility for their lives. They're not really trusting. They're hiding. They're not really allowing. They're being passive out of fear. True allowing comes from a place of inner strength and self-trust. False allowing comes from a place of weakness and fear. The difference? People who are truly allowing are still engaged with life, still growing, still showing up. They're just not attached to forcing specific outcomes. People who are spiritually bypassing are checked out, stagnant, and using spiritual language to justify their avoidance. Integration exercise. Here's a powerful question Jung might ask. Where in your life are you forcing something that wants to die? And what are you avoiding that wants to be born? That question can change everything if you're honest with yourself. Now, the third sign is perhaps the most misunderstood of all, and it has to do with how these people experience and process pain. Sign 3. They've transformed suffering into wisdom, the myth of constant happiness. Here's a lie that the modern spiritual and self-help movement perpetuates. If you're doing it right, if you're high vibe, if you're enlightened, you'll be happy all the time. This is not only false, it's dangerous, and it's the complete opposite of what Carl Jung taught. People with high vibration aren't perpetually happy. They haven't transcended suffering. They haven't manifested a life free from pain. What they've done is something far more profound. They've transformed their relationship with suffering. Jung's perspective on suffering. Carl Jung understood something that makes many people uncomfortable. Suffering is essential for psychological development. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Not suffering is one possible path. Not suffering can sometimes be useful. No, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is radically different from the toxic positivity that dominates our culture today. Jung believed that our wounds, our trauma, our darkness, our suffering, these aren't obstacles to overcome and forget. They're the raw material for transformation, the wounded healer archetype. Jung introduced the concept of the wounded healer, an archetype that appears across cultures and throughout history. The wounded healer is someone who has been deeply wounded themselves, descended into their own darkness, faced their own suffering, and emerged transformed. And it's precisely because they've been wounded that they can heal others. Their wounds have become their wisdom. Their pain has become their power. People with high vibration embody this archetype. You can feel it when you talk to them. They don't give you superficial advice or toxic positivity. They don't tell you everything happens for a reason or that you should just think positive. Instead, they sit with you in your darkness without being afraid of it. They can hold space for your pain without trying to fix it or minimize it. Why? Because they've sat in that darkness themselves. What this actually looks like. Let me describe what this sign looks like in practice. Characteristic 1. Deep empathy without enmeshment. They can feel deeply for others' suffering, but they don't lose themselves in it. They've learned the difference between empathy and codependency. They can say, "I see your pain, I honor it, and I'm here with you," without saying, "Your pain is my responsibility to fix." Characteristic 2. Comfortable with difficult emotions. When they experience grief, anger, fear, or despair, they don't immediately try to escape it. They don't numb it with substances, distraction, or toxic positivity. They sit with it. They feel it fully. They let it move through them. And because they've done this work, difficult emotions don't scare them anymore. They understand that emotions are temporary weather patterns, not their fundamental nature. Characteristic 3, they share vulnerably. In a world where everyone's pretending to have it all together, people with high vibration share their struggles authentically. We want enlightenment without darkness. We want the gold without the alchemical fire. We want wisdom without the wounds. But Jung would tell us it doesn't work that way. The gift of suffering. Here's what people with high vibration have learned. Suffering is a portal. It's a portal to deeper compassion. You can't truly understand others' pain until you've known your own. Authentic strength. Not the ego's false confidence, but the quiet, unshakable strength that comes from having walked through fire. Profound presence. When you've sat with your own darkness, you're no longer afraid of the present moment, whatever it contains. True humility. Suffering breaks down the ego's arrogance and opens you to mystery. Meaning and purpose. Often our deepest wounds point us toward our life's work. A critical distinction. But here's something crucial I need to say. This doesn't mean you should seek out suffering or romanticize it. Jung isn't saying go traumatize yourself. What he's saying is, when suffering comes, and it will come to everyone, you have a choice. You can resist it, deny it, run from it, numb it, and stay stuck in victim consciousness. Or you can move through it consciously, extract its wisdom, integrate its lessons, and emerge transformed. That's the difference between trauma that destroys and suffering that evolves you. Personal reflection. Think about the most difficult period of your life. The thing you wouldn't wish on anyone. Now ask yourself, what did that experience teach you? Who did you become because of it? What depths of yourself did you discover? If you can find even one gift in that suffering, you're beginning the alchemical process. You're beginning to transform lead into gold. And this brings us to our fourth and final sign, which might be the most powerful of all. Sign 4. They live from authentic self rather than conditioned ego. The masks we wear. From the moment we're born, we begin absorbing messages about who we should be. Your parents have expectations. Society has rules. Your culture has norms. Your peers have standards. And slowly, layer by layer, you build a personality designed to fit in, to be accepted, to survive. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear for the world. The persona isn't bad. It's necessary. We all need some level of social adaptation. But here's the problem. Most people become so identified with their persona that they forget it's a mask. They think the mask is who they are. They've lost contact with what Jung called the self, their authentic, true nature, the process of individuation. This brings us to perhaps Jung's most important concept, individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, of differentiating yourself from the collective, of integrating all the scattered parts of your psyche into a coherent, authentic whole. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this is far harder than it sounds, because becoming who you truly are requires disappointing people, breaking social conventions, facing rejection, standing alone, questioning everything you've been taught, risking the loss of relationships, careers, and identities you've built? Most people never do it. They live and die wearing the mask, never knowing who was underneath. But people with high vibration have begun this journey. They're living from their authentic self, rather than their conditioned ego. What this looks like in practice. Sign 1. They don't need your approval. Not in an arrogant way. They're not trying to prove they don't care what you think. They simply have an internal sense of rightness that doesn't require external validation. You can see it in how they make decisions. They don't constantly ask for others' opinions. They don't need consensus. They check in with themselves first. Sign 2. They have clearly defined boundaries. Because they know who they are, they also know who they're not. They can say no without guilt or over-explanation. They can decline invitations, opportunities, and relationships that don't align with their authentic path. And they do this kindly but firmly. Sign 3. Their life choices don't always make sense to others. They might choose a career path that seems financially unwise but feeds their soul. They might walk away from relationships that look perfect on paper but feel wrong energetically. They might make decisions that confuse their family, perplex their friends, and concern their colleagues. And they're okay with that. Sign 4. They express themselves authentically. Their style, their interests, their opinions, their way of being in the world, it's all genuinely them. Not a curated version designed to impress. Not a persona crafted to fit in. Just authentic expression. The shadow integration. Here's where it gets really profound. True authenticity requires shadow integration. Remember, earlier when we talked about the shadow, all the parts of yourself you've rejected? Most people's authentic self is actually just their conscious ego plus their persona. They haven't touched the shadow. But people with high vibration have done the difficult work of acknowledging the parts of themselves they've been ashamed of, integrating the qualities they've judged as bad, accepting their full humanity, light and dark, noble and base, angelic and animalistic. Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." This is radical. He's saying that psychological wholeness, which includes accepting your darkness, is more important than being good, according to society's standards. When you integrate your shadow, something magical happens. You stop projecting. You stop seeing your rejected qualities in others and judging them for it. You stop creating enemies and villains. You take responsibility for your full self. And that's when you become truly authentic. The courage it requires. Let's be honest about something. Living authentically is terrifying. It requires more courage than most people have. Because when you start living from your authentic self, some people will abandon you. Others will criticize you. Your family might not understand you. You might lose status, money, or opportunities. You'll face your deepest fears of rejection and abandonment. But here's what people with high vibration have realized. The cost of not living authentically is higher. The cost is a life half-lived, creativity suppressed, vitality drained, purpose unfulfilled, the constant gnawing sense that you're betraying yourself. When you truly understand this, the choice becomes clear. The magnetic effect. Here's something beautiful that happens when someone lives from their authentic self. They become magnetic. Not in a manipulative or trying to attract way. Just naturally magnetic. Because authenticity is rare. It's powerful. It's alive. People feel it even if they can't articulate it. They're drawn to it. The right people, opportunities, and experiences start showing up. The universe seems to conspire in support of someone living their truth. Jung's concept of synchronicity appears again. When you align with your authentic self, life aligns with you. A warning about spiritual ego. Before we conclude, Jung would want me to warn you about something. The spiritual ego. This is when the ego hijacks your spiritual journey and creates a new, more spiritual persona. You start identifying as high vibration, awakened, enlightened, and this becomes a new mask, a new role, a new source of superiority. True authenticity doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. If you find yourself constantly telling people how evolved you are, how much shadow work you've done, how high your vibration is, that's ego, not self. The truly authentic person is simply living their life, being themselves, without needing to broadcast their spiritual status. Finally, understand this: individuation isn't a destination. It's a lifelong process. You don't achieve authenticity and then you're done. You don't finish shadow work. Every stage of life brings new challenges, new aspects of yourself to integrate, new layers of conditioning to see through. Jung died at 85, and according to those who knew him, he was still actively engaged in his own individuation process, still discovering new aspects of himself. This should be comforting, not discouraging. It means you're never behind. You're exactly where you need to be on your journey. So there you have it. The 4 unusual signs that someone is vibrating at a higher level of consciousness, viewed through the profound lens of Carl Jung's psychology. 1. They're comfortable with solitude because they've met themselves in the silence and integrated their shadow. 2. They've stopped chasing and started allowing because they've learned to let the self lead rather than the ego force. 3. They've transformed suffering into wisdom because they've gone through the alchemical process and emerged with the gold. 4. They live from authentic self rather than conditioned ego because they've done the courageous work of individuation. These aren't qualities you're born with. They're developed through experience, struggle, introspection, and the brave choice to keep growing even when it's painful. And here's what I want you to understand. If these signs resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in some of these descriptions, that's not coincidence. You're on this path. You're doing this work. You might be further along than you realize. But if you're feeling like you're not there yet, that's okay too. Just the fact that you watched this entire video, that you're interested in these concepts, that you're asking these questions, that shows you're already beginning the journey. Jung believed that psychological growth happens both consciously and unconsciously. Your unconscious is always working on your behalf, always trying to move you toward wholeness. Pay attention to your dreams, journal, spend time in solitude, sit with your difficult emotions, question your automatic reactions. Notice when you're wearing a mask and when you're being authentic, and be patient with yourself. This is lifelong work. There's no rush. There's no competition. There's only your unique path of becoming who you truly are. I'll leave you with one more Jung quote that encapsulates everything we've discussed. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. May you have the courage to look inside. May you have the strength to face what you find there. And may you have the wisdom to transform it all into consciousness. Thank you for watching. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into psychology, consciousness, and personal transformation. And drop a comment below telling me which of these 4 signs resonated with you most. Are you on this journey of individuation? I read every comment and I'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, keep growing, keep questioning, and keep becoming who you truly are.